There are words that hurt, and then there are words that completely change how you see yourself. My wife didn't yell. She didn't argue. She didn't even raise her voice. She just looked at me calmly, like she had already figured me out, and said, "You're nothing without me." And the worst part wasn't how it sounded. It was how certain she was when she said it. I didn't fight back. I didn't defend myself. I just said, "Okay," and walked away. But what I did after that night, she never saw coming. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to play it straight. They had every chance to walk away clean. They just chose the hard way. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe. You're going to enjoy this one. This isn't a story about shouting or betrayal in the usual sense. There was no cheating, no dramatic explosion, no slammed doors. This is about something much quieter and far more dangerous. The kind of disrespect that builds slowly over time. So slowly you don't even notice it happening until one day it shows up in a single sentence, and that sentence changes everything. My name is Daniel. I'm 44 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I was a good husband. Not perfect, not extraordinary, but consistent, the kind of man who shows up, who works hard, who tries to do things the right way. I met my wife Vanessa when we were both 23. She was everything I wasn't at the time: confident, focused, and already moving forward with a clear direction. She belonged in every room she walked into, while I was still trying to build something that didn't yet exist. Back then, I had just started a small financial consulting business. It wasn't stable, it wasn't impressive, and for the first few years, it barely made enough to sustain itself. Vanessa, on the other hand, was doing well. She had a stable job, a clear path, and a level of certainty that I admired deeply. In those early years, she carried more than I did, financially and emotionally, and I never denied that. I appreciated it, I respected it, and I made sure she knew it mattered. But what I didn't understand at the time was that those years weren't just helping us survive. They were shaping how she saw me. Slowly, without either of us realizing it, a quiet imbalance started forming. She became the one who had already arrived, and I became the one who was still trying to get there. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone slowly started seeing you as less than who you really are? Not suddenly, not directly, but over time, like your value kept getting smaller in their eyes. If you've ever felt that, hit the like button, because you're going to understand this story on a different level. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? At first, the changes were subtle. It wasn't anything obvious or confrontational. It was in the way she spoke, the way she asked questions, the tone behind simple words. She started using one word more than anything else, still. As in, are you still working on that? Or are you still trying to grow that? On the surface, it sounded harmless. But over time, that word started carrying weight. It stopped sounding like curiosity and started sounding like doubt. By the time my business actually began to grow, when I had clients, employees, and real momentum, she had already decided what it was in her mind. Temporary, unstable, not quite real success. Meanwhile, her career was taking off. She made partner, her income increased, her reputation grew, and I was genuinely proud of her. But pride didn't protect me from what was happening underneath the surface. Because while she was moving forward, she had quietly decided that I wasn't moving fast enough. And the worst part was, I started believing it too. The night everything changed didn't start as anything unusual. It was a normal Thursday evening. Dinner was on the table, the kids were upstairs, and everything felt routine. The argument started over something small, or at least it seemed small at first. I had turned down a major business deal because something about it didn't sit right with me. The client had questionable ethics, and I didn't want that attached to my work. Vanessa didn't see it that way. To her, it was a missed opportunity, a foolish decision. We went back and forth, not loudly, but with increasing tension. It wasn't really about the deal anymore. It was about something deeper that had been building for years. And then, in the middle of that conversation, she said it. "You're nothing without me, Daniel." There was no anger in her voice, no hesitation, just certainty, and that's what made it worse. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was stating what she believed to be a fact. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had too much to say, and none of it felt right in that moment. I could have defended myself, listed everything I had built, everything I had done, everything I had contributed. But something inside me stopped me. Because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about understanding whether what she said was true. So instead of reacting, I said one word. Okay. And I walked upstairs. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because something inside me became incredibly clear. For the first time in years, there was no confusion, no mixed signals, no guessing. I knew exactly where I stood in her eyes. And in that silence, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for a long time. Who am I without her? Not emotionally, not as a husband, but as a man. And the answer forced me to confront something uncomfortable. I had built something real, something valuable, but I had been acting like it wasn't enough. Not because it wasn't, but because I had allowed someone else's perception of me to become my reality. That night, I didn't make a decision about my marriage. I made a decision about myself. I decided that I was going to find out who I actually was, without her definition of me. Stay with me here, because what happens next is not what you think. The next 18 months completely changed everything, and not in the way most people expect. Also, quick question, what time is it where you're watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments. I didn't argue with her again. I didn't bring it up. I didn't try to prove her wrong. Instead, I focused on something much more important myself. I stopped playing small in my business. I stopped downplaying my achievements, stopped hesitating on opportunities, and stopped questioning whether I deserved to be in bigger rooms. And once I did that, things started changing. The business grew faster. Bigger clients came in. Decisions became clearer. At the same time, I built a routine that was entirely mine. Every morning at 5:30, I ran. It didn't matter if it was cold, dark, or uncomfortable. I ran because those miles were mine. No one could take them, question them, or redefine them. And then I did something I had never done before. I went to therapy. Alone. And that's where I understood everything. I wasn't weak. I wasn't less. I had just learned, over time, to shrink myself in order to maintain peace. And once I saw that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Vanessa noticed the change, even though I never announced it. I didn't become louder or more aggressive. I simply stopped seeking approval. I stopped explaining every decision. I stopped trying to fit into the version of me she had created. And that confused her, because she didn't recognize this version of me. 18 months later, I asked her to sit down. I placed 3 things on the table: proof of my business growth, a reflection of my personal progress, and a symbol of something I had done entirely for myself. Then I told her everything. Not angrily, not emotionally, but clearly. I told her who I was, what I had built, and what I had realized. And then I said, "You were wrong about me." She looked at me, and after a long silence, she said something I didn't expect. "I know. This isn't where I left her. This isn't where I walked away. Because the truth is, I didn't need to anymore." For the first time, I wasn't staying because I needed her. I was staying because I chose to. And that changed everything. Be honest, what would you have done? Would you have stayed or walked away? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. That sentence could have destroyed me. But instead, it forced me to see myself clearly for the first time in years. And sometimes, the worst thing someone says to you becomes the reason you finally become who you were always meant to be. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories every week. And tell me, where are you watching from? Until next time.